Hey, this is Megan from the Friedman Branch Library, and I'm back with another Draw With Me video. Today we're going to be talking all about comics because Free Comic Book Day is coming up soon this month. So I'm going to briefly go over the different types of comics there are, and then we're going to do a small tutorial on how to make a comic strip. So let's get started. So I want to briefly go over the different types of comics that you'll typically find in the bookstores or in the libraries. So we have a few here in our library here at Friedman. Now you're probably familiar with books like Garfield. So Garfield is usually a comic strip that you would see published in, most of the time, a newspaper. So you'll notice how there's 3 panels here going from left to right, because that's usually how we would read it here in the States. And these are usually just kind of Sundays because they're a little bit longer format, but usually typically you'll see like 3 or 4 panels with a comic strip. So this is an example of comic strips. You can find that at your local library. Now we'll go over manga. So manga originated in Japan. And one of the big differences you'll see with manga is that, of course, it's read from right to left because that's how reading is done in Japan. So you'll notice that you still have panels and things in the comics, but you must start on this side of the page here. So this would be the first panel that I would read, and then I would go to the left, and then I would go down and keep reading that way. But that's the biggest difference, and of course the art style is very distinctive with manga, so you can kind of check out different types of that here at your local library as well. Our next example of comics would be a graphic novel. So one of the biggest differences with graphic novels is that usually these are longer formats. So it's just like a book, honestly. It's still got, your typical panels, which of course this is read from left to right. So you'd start over here and go down, and you'd keep reading to the right there. But as you can see, there are like over 100 pages for this graphic novel specifically. So that's what makes this a graphic novel, is that it's in a longer kind of book format. And our last example, of course, is kind of your typical comic book that you would find at the local comic store in your town or at any local bookstores that sell comics. So the difference with this is that typically American comics, especially if they're like action comics, or it could be really any genre, it doesn't have to be action comics, but typically these are about 22 pages. So you're not going to really find super long comic books, but the panels of course are similar to that of what you just saw with graphic novels. Of course you read from left to right with this, but you're only going to get about 20 to 24 pages of comic with this. So those are the different types of comics. Now let's get into drawing our own comic. Alright, so we're going to get started with making our own comic strip. And there are a few tools that you will need in order to draw your own comic strip. Of course, you need a piece of paper. It can be a regular size print paper, but I would recommend definitely getting a sketchbook, something that may have a little bit of a thicker piece of paper so that when you're inking, it won't bleed through as much. But yes, you can use a sketchbook. You're going to need a ruler for drawing your panel lines. And of course, you're probably going to need some ink liners. So anything like this you can find at your local art store. And I also have this brush pen as well. You can get that at your local art store. I've got my pencil, and then I've got an eraser here for if I make any mistakes, I can go ahead and recorrect them. Okay, so for my drawing today, I'm going to be doing a comic strip. As I said before, I gave an example of Garfield or any of the Sunday comics that you see in the newspaper. Typically, they have 3 to 4 panels in them. So I'm going to first start off by drawing my panels on my paper. I'm going to use my ruler to draw 4 squares to get started. So let's see how that turns out. Okay, so now that we have our panels drawn out, the next thing to do would be to draw out our story. So typically a comic strip is usually humorous. It doesn't have to be, but that's normally what you see with comic strips. So you probably definitely want to plan out what your story is in these 4 panels. I kind of know what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a scene in each one of these, and then I will add in some talking bubbles here so that you know what my characters are saying, and then we'll get ready to ink. Alright, so as you can see, I've finished my sketch for what the comic strip has in it, and so the next step is to go in with my either brush pen or my ink liners to go over the pencil and make it stand out more. And then after that, you'll pretty much be done. So let's just get started with that. Okay, so this is the finished product of our comic strip. I've already inked everything, and I've already written in our talking bubbles here so that you can see what's going on in our little comic strip here. So that's the basics of how you would start a comic strip, and it could be about anything. You can pretty much have your own storylines, just whatever you like. And so just get started and start drawing. So good luck. Thanks for watching.